Wait, just before we get started, a quick reminder that I edit books. If you are an author with a manuscript, there is a link in the description to my editing services. Whether you're planning on sending your book to an agent or self-publishing it, you need to get your work edited, and I am a fantastic editor. So if you've written a piece of fiction, be it a short story, a novella, or a novel, of any genre at all, send it to me and I will edit it and make it perfect, make it sing so it's ready for publication or to be sent off to an agent. The link is in the description. This month, in fact, I edited an incredible work of feminist horror that is so good. I really can't wait for it to see the light of day. I'm very proud of this author. So writers, send me your manuscripts. Now, on with the video. Let's start with Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinnerman, a name I still really struggle to say. Not Matt Dinnerman, but Carl. Carl is not a name suited to the English tongue. I made a whole video about this book because it really took me by surprise. I had no idea that I was going to love this book as much as I do. I took a gamble on it, and it was a big gamble because I had to get it imported and it cost a lot of money. But it turns out that Dungeon Crawler Carl is exactly as good as everyone says it is. You need to believe the hype, which is I think what I called the video that I did on the book. I have, since making that video, picked up the second book in the series, and there are currently 7, and I'm probably going to slowly make my way through all of them on like a monthly basis. Dungeon Crawler Carl is a lit RPG. It's got kind of isekai vibes, and the setup of the book also kind of reminds me of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. When the novel begins, alien invaders come to Earth and they smush every single building, meaning the only people who survive right from the get-go are people who happened to be outside when the aliens came to visit. Those survivors are given the option to go into these video game-like dungeons and slowly make their way through a video game-like gauntlet, which is televised to other races and planets out in the galaxy. This is something that's done all the time, and it's Earth's turn, and we follow Carl, a man who goes into the dungeon in just his underwear with his ex-girlfriend's cat for company. If you love RPGs, both tabletop and video game, you're going to get a lot out of this book, and it really manages to blend genuine heartfelt drama with absolute laugh-out-loud moments. I would argue that it is a comedy novel first and foremost, but it's a comedy with so much heart, and I adore it. Then we have Gifted and Talented by Olivia Blake, which I was unfortunately disappointed by. I didn't like her first novel, The Atlas 6, at all. I made a video about that ages ago. Don't watch it. I look and sound very different. But despite not enjoying The Atlas 6, when I saw Gifted and Talented, I thought, this sounds so good. It has so much potential that I need to pick it up. I picked it up, I read it, and I still didn't really like it. Or at least I grew to dislike it as I went on. It has a wonderful opening act. So many great chapters, one after another, building on the characters and the central conceit and the relationships between these characters. It's a lot of fun. It is laugh out loud funny in the first few chapters, and then it just loses steam, falls on its belly, and crawls to the finish line. The first 150 pages of this book are absolutely stellar, and then it's a damp squib. Nothing happens, nothing good or interesting happens after a while. This should have been a novella, a short story, or maybe an ordinary length novel. 300 pages and I wouldn't have been so harsh, but this thing is 500 pages, and it has no business being that long. Especially when the history and the lore of the world that we're presented with, and it's kind of an alternate Earth, none of it is fleshed out enough or explored in any interesting way. The themes morph and change into something less interesting in the second half, and the characters don't become more interesting people. They're funny and awful at the beginning, and that's really fun, but then nothing happens. Not only do they not change, which isn't something that really bothers me, it's the fact that they don't do anything. So there's nothing to really enjoy. You can read the first third of this book and have a decently fun time, and then, I don't know, just stop. Another book that I didn't plan on reading, but I ended up picking up anyway and giving a chance, was Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is the newest Hunger Game book, and I am a big big fan of the original trilogy, as well as the film adaptations. I think The Hunger Games is great. I don't say that much because it feels redundant. Everyone likes The Hunger Games, and with good reason. But The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is a book that I didn't finish. I found it so uninteresting. I couldn't get through it, I didn't watch the film, and so I wasn't sure about this, but it turns out this might be the best Hunger Game book. Sunrise on the Reaping is set 24 years before the events of the first book, and it follows Haymitch Abernathy when he was a teenager, and he was reaped for the Hunger Games. And it is such a smart book that builds on so many of the socialist themes of the Hunger Games books. It elevates those themes and makes me think that perhaps Suzanne Collins has doubled down on her own politics. The thing about her is that we don't know anything about Suzanne Collins. We don't know her politics. I don't even know what she looks like. Her photo's not in the book. She keeps herself to herself, but her politics are pretty obvious when you read these books. And the Hunger Games books are obviously incredibly woke. And this goes even further. This is a strongly, staunchly, politically fierce novel that I really enjoyed. I did a full video that you can go check out. Now, I have a plan to read all of Hannah Kaner's Godkiller trilogy. I have all 3 books, all in gorgeous hardback, and they really are so beautiful. But I haven't gotten to the other 2 yet, and I read this a little while ago. So in March, I reread Godkiller. And it holds up, although I think it only came out 2, maybe 3 years ago, so I'm not surprised. But one thing I really respect Hannah Kaner for is the fact that this book is short. It's under 300 pages long. That is so rare and unique for a work of epic fantasy. I love fantasy fiction, but I continually struggle with how long fantasy books insist on being. I fully understand why they're so long and why trilogies and series are so long and go on forever. I get it, but I am very grateful that this is so short. It's a daring and unique thing to do. And Godkiller is smart, it is fun, and it really pulls on your heartstrings. So pretty soon I'm going to read books 2 and 3 and do a full video on all of it. Stay tuned for that. In March, I also read The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 3rd and final book in the Mistborn trilogy, although there are other Mistborn books that you can continue reading. I read this trilogy month after month after month, January, February, March. And then I did a big video on the trilogy itself, and I was very enthusiastic about the trilogy in that video. But as it's kind of sunk into my brain and I've had some time to digest it and I've read other works of fantasy, I do wonder if I was a little bit hyperbolic about this trilogy in that video. It's good. It's really good, and I understand the hype, I get why he's so famous, I get why he's everybody's favorite fantasy author, and there's a lot that I really appreciate about how Brandon Sanderson explores politics and religion, especially as a Mormon. It's really interesting and weird, and I think I want to keep talking about that. Sanderson's relationship to religion is fascinating. There is no cohesion between his fiction and the way he explores religion in it, and the religion that he's a part of, which most of us agree is a dangerous cult. And because of that, I have gone back and forth on my relationship with Sanderson. For the longest time, I refused to read him because he's a Mormon. Then that kind of felt like its own version of bigotry, or at least religious intolerance from my part as an atheist. And so at the start of this year, I made a video about how I'm gonna start reading him because I kind of felt like an asshole. And now I'm going back again. I don't know where to come down on it. Honestly. I think not being American makes it a little bit more difficult because Mormonism just really isn't a big thing outside of the States. And I think I can be quite naive to the damages of Mormonism. But Sanderson is such an interesting author that I can't help but pay attention to how he approaches religion in his fiction. It's complicated, and I don't know where to come down on it. And I could make video after video after video, and I will get hundreds upon hundreds of comments from people on both sides of the argument. Nobody will agree. I don't know where I stand. Generally, my politics are pretty simple. I am a very far left person, I am a queer person, and I stand against fascism and prejudice in all of their forms. And then Sanderson comes along as this just weird anomaly, this grey area in the world of religion and politics. And I get confused and frustrated. And I like his books just enough to keep thinking and paying attention to the strangeness of his fiction compared to his life and the religion he chooses to stay a part of. I'm going down a massive internal rabbit hole as I think about this, so I'm gonna stop. Maybe I'll do a video on it, maybe I'll keep reading him, maybe I'll read The Way of Kings next, maybe I'll never touch his books again. I honestly don't know. I'm very confused. It's bizarre. He's so bizarre. But if I never touch him again, luckily, he's the biggest fantasy author in the world and he doesn't need my help. Or maybe I'll keep reading him. I don't know. I don't know. Tell me what you think, and be a dick about it. Most people are. A brand new fantasy book that everybody in the whole world should be paying attention to right now and giving all of their love to is this, A Song of Legends Lost by M.H. Allende. I did a full review of this, and honestly, this is the first book in a trilogy that could be shaping up to be the great new work of epic fantasy that everyone should be fawning over and talking about and shoving into the hands of their friends. This is a really astonishing work of epic fantasy, inspired by African mythology. It reminded me of my favorite anime growing up, Shaman King. Could it be my destiny to be Shaman King? I have so much love for the characters and the world that is created here. It's the story of a lost civilization, the story of ancestors and lineage, the story of bloodlines and responsibility. And it doesn't only take inspiration from African folklore. There's also a storyline in this book that is basically Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and I found that really, really interesting. And that is as British as you get. I also struggle to believe that this is a debut novel. It is written with so much confidence and edited so precisely and so well. If you love epic fantasy, A Song of Legends Lost is an absolute must-read. One of the most impressive books of 2025 so far, especially in the world of fantasy. And the last fantasy book that I have to talk about in this video is Prince of Thorns, which was another reread. I think this is actually my third or maybe fourth time reading this book. I love the works of Mark Lawrence. I've got one of his newer books on my TBR. The Book That Wouldn't Burn, I think that's what it's called. And Prince of Thorns has ruffled a lot of feathers because it's a very grim-dark book with one of the most horribly unlikable protagonists who has ever existed in the fantasy genre, and I absolutely love it to pieces. I think this is an incredible work of truly grim, dark fantasy. And weirdly enough, despite just how bleak this book is and how full of violence it is and cruelty, it's a book that I often turn to as a comfort read. I don't know why. Maybe it's for the same reason that I mostly listen to black metal and death metal. There is something cathartic in reading a book as violent as this one. It's a weird psychological thing. And I made a video about it, so check that out. Prince of Thorns just continues to be a reliable comfort read to me, and I had a lot of fun rereading it yet again. Something I have never gotten to grips with when it comes to my own self is the fact that I'm a mood reader. I underestimate how being a mood reader works and how it affects your mood. At the start of this year, I made a whole very dramatic video about how I'm gonna read fantasy from now on because it's all I'm in the mood for, and everything else makes me sad and depressed and blah blah blah. And then of course, like 2 weeks ago, I woke up with an insatiable urge for something dark and gothic and moody, and now all I want to read is horror and gothic fiction. Why do I make these statements? Why do I do this? Why don't I just read whatever I want to read at any given moment? But for those fans of this channel who have missed me talking about dark gothic horror stuff, I'm back. For now, maybe? And I returned to gothic horror fiction by reading Hungerstone by Kat Dunn, my favourite novel of this entire year so far. Hungerstone is a historical gothic horror novel and a loose adaptation of Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, the first vampire novel. It is sapphic, it is sensual, it is seductive, it is salacious? No, not really. But it is really fucking good. Of all the recent modern authors to take us back to the world of the Gothic and recapture its themes, Kat Dunn is at the top of that stack with Hungerstone. I am fully amazed by how far she goes to capture all of the themes, ideas, atmosphere, character archetypes, traditions of setting and aesthetics and story beats, etc. of the Gothic genre. And the Gothic genre is my lifeblood. I have a Frankenstein tattoo. Classic Gothic fiction is everything to me, and Hungerstone reminded me why that's the case. I have a full video review, so go watch that if you're interested. And of course, I couldn't stop with something recent. I had to go back to a classic as well, which means I had to reread Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I did a video on this as well. Go watch it. And Rebecca is one of my absolute favorite novels of all time. It remains a classic for so many reasons, and honestly, I think I'm gonna cut this section here because I did a half-hour video on this book. 30 minutes dedicated to just how clever Rebecca is. Dedicated to just how much love and respect I have for this book, for Daphne du Maurier, and how Rebecca has shaped modern fiction. God, I love this thing. Oh, it's so clever. And it's so beautiful. Oh my god. Read Rebecca, but also go watch that video. Coming up toward the end of April, I read Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fato. Victorian Psycho is wonderful. It is brilliantly titled because it really does feel like American Psycho in a lot of ways. Thematically, tonally, aesthetically, it does have a lot of overlaps with American Psycho. It is also a brutally dark story, and I would argue it is darker and more triggering than American Psycho ever was. And I have to be very vague here because I can't say any of this openly on YouTube, but if you get upset by the idea of babies being hurt, don't read this book. If this thing had been written 100, 200 years ago, oh my god, the scandals. This is not pleasant. But it also is, because everything in this book, or nearly everything, is kind of played for dark laughs. There is a very, very bleak humor to this book, and you'll either enjoy that or you won't. This is not for everyone. It was for me, but I have to admit, I finished reading it just a few days ago, and I'm already starting to forget it. It's not the kind of book that sticks in your head, apart from the really shocking scenes. I went into more detail in my most recent video, so you can go check that out. I know I keep saying this, but that's kind of the point of these videos, to point you to other videos that you should check out. But Victorian Psycho is definitely one of those books that I will, over time, forget I ever read. But I did have a fun time with it, because it is so dark. It's really short. It's like 200 pages, and I read it in a day or two. It is dripping with dark atmosphere. It is horror from the other side, and it is so uncomfortably funny. You feel bad for laughing at it, but you will. You will, for better or worse. I am a massive fan of Dutch author Johanna van Veen. Late last year, I read her debut novel, My Darling Dreadful Thing, and it took my breath away. It was an incredible work of gothic historical horror set in the Netherlands in the 1950s that completely ripped my heart out, tore it to shreds, and fed it to me. That book is a gothic heartbreak. And Blood on Her Tongue is similar. It's another gothic historical novel by the same author, so it's going to feel tonally similar, but it deals with very different themes and different kinds of relationships. While My Darling Dreadful Thing was kind of about friendship and romance, this is about familial ties and sisterhood. And again, I went into more detail in my previous video, so you can go check it out, but this and My Darling Dreadful Thing have secured Johanna van Veen as one of my favorite authors writing today. And she's probably watching this because I know she's a fan. So Johanna, I have so much to thank you for. You are incredible, you are an inspiration, and I love you to pieces. Keep doing this. And just to finish off, I read a few comic books in March and April. I'm currently feeling a very strong kinship with the X-Men right now. Probably not a mystery why. And so I've got a whole bunch of X-Men comics on the go. But before that, I read The Ultimates. This is a brand new multiversal, alternate dimension, universe reset thing of the Avengers. It's written by Denise Camp, whom I have never ever read before, and it's drawn by Juan Frigeri, who I've also never ever read before. And together they do some amazingly unique things with storytelling in this book. The fourth issue of Ultimates is written and structured in a really unique way that makes you reread it multiple times from different angles. Very, very clever. I love when writers and artists remember the fact that comic books are a unique medium, and they can use that fact to tell unique stories that wouldn't work in prose or in film. Comics are their own thing, and these guys get that, and I really appreciate it. But as I said, obsessed with X-Men right now. And, lucky for me, the X-Men universe, it's all had a kind of new status quo. For about 6 years now, the X-Men comics existed in this era of their own called the Krakoa Age. Krakoa is a mutant who is also an island where most mutants were living. Throughout the Krakoa Age, different writers came in and out and wrote stories that were kind of up and down. Of all the comic books that you ever might want to get into, X-Men is the most confusing one, because there are so many shifts to the status quo, so many new mutants who come in and old mutants who leave. If you've seen the films or watched the 90s cartoon, you'll have a rough idea of what X-Men is, but it's so much more than that. Pretty much everything X-Men we've ever seen on the screen, big or small, is kind of stuck in the 80s. But the X-Men status quo has shifted so much, especially this century. And a lot of that began with Grant Morrison, and I'm currently rereading his new X-Men, but I'm not ready to talk about that yet. So the Krakoa age has come to an end, and a handful of new writers and artists are making multiple X-Men comic stories. One of my favorite writers in the whole wide world, Gail Simone, is currently writing Uncanny X-Men, and I've got that ready to read, but I haven't started it yet. And Jed MacKay, a writer I've never read before, although he was writing The Avengers for a while, but I didn't read it, is tackling a comic just called X-Men. After the Krakoa age came to an end, the X-Men kind of split into different factions, and one of those factions lives in an abandoned Sentinel factory in Alaska, led by Cyclops and Magneto. And these X-Men are kind of punk renegades. They are a misfit group trying to do what they can to help with very limited resources. Having not read the Krakoa age all the way through from beginning to end, I was a little bit confused in places about the status quo, about what happened to Magneto because he's gone through some awful stuff. There's been a lot for me to fill in the blanks of, but I did really enjoy this, and it's very, very focused on action. This is pretty much just an action movie from beginning to end. So many big fight scenes, so many exciting set pieces. It was really fun. I've waffled a lot because I'm trying to get myself back into the world of X-Men, and there is so much. Cartoons to watch, films to watch, but mostly thousands of comics to read if I want to remember how X-Men works. I've only ever dipped in and out of X-Men comics, but right now it is my hyper-fixation, and so I'm reading a lot. I also don't mind waffling about comics at the end there, because the people who are interested will listen to me waffle, and the people who don't care about comics aren't watching this anymore. Anyway, that is everything that I read in both March and April. Thank you so much for watching. Go watch all those other videos that I made that you might have missed. I am also keenly aware of the fact that I never plug my own book, and I really should mention that in every single video. If you haven't read my book, there are links to it in the description. Managing and Other Lies is a collection of extreme trans horror stories. I'm very proud of it. I'm going to keep writing short stories, and I'll be posting those short stories on my Patreon first. So if you're interested, support me on Patreon, buy my book, and you can see how not only am I an amazing YouTuber, a brilliant critic, a wonderful editor, but also a very talented writer in my own right. I am feeling good about myself today. Read my book. Subscribe for books.